Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Small Talk. Let's grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and get into today's conversation. I am Sean, and this is a space for the conversations men usually avoid. And honestly, this whole podcast comes out of something I've been realizing more and more over the last few years. Over the last few years, I've been on my own mental health recovery journey, and through my other podcast, Beyond Sexual Brokenness, I've had the chance to have a lot of honest conversation with some very direct and honest men, including also experts in a variety of mental health topics. Conversations about addiction, shame, relationships, growth, faith, failure, pressure, about life, really. And one thing that kept standing out to me was that there were still a lot of things we were just not talking about. And not because we didn't care, not because we weren't smart enough, not because we were bad people, because a lot of us have gotten really, really good at staying surface level. I have been that for a very long time in my life. Before I go any further, though, I have to be fair to us men for a minute because staying surface level isn't always a bad thing. In fact, sometimes it's a strength. Sometimes it's part of the definition of being a man for many of us. Life throws a lot at us. People depend on us. Bills need to get paid. Projects need to get finished. Problems need to get solved. Families need leadership. That's a perspective for many of us. A lot of men take pride in being able to stay composed during adversity. Honestly, I do too. I take a lot of pride in that. And I think there's something admirable about a man who can take a punch from life, steadying himself, and keep moving forward. I think that's part of being dependable, part of being resilient, part of being a leader. For me, the problem isn't that we are subsurface level. The problem is when we only do that. When every disappointment gets postponed, when every frustration gets pushed aside, when every fear gets buried under another project, I do this often, another responsibility, another problem to solve. Because eventually, from my experience, the shelf gets full. And what we refuse to deal with doesn't disappear. That's been my experience. It waits. And sooner or later it leaks. Now, maybe some of you are listening and thinking, oh, great, here's another invitation to talk about feelings. Fair enough. Honestly, I get it. I have rolled my eyes at such invitations, both literally and figuratively speaking, for a long time in my life. I'm not asking us to jump all the way to an open invitation to talk about feelings. I want us to take baby steps and go beyond small talk. This is a journey. There have been plenty of seasons in my own life where I didn't want to sit down and analyze what I've been feeling either. I wanted to stay busy. I wanted to be productive. I wanted to solve the problem. I wanted to move on. And honestly, sometimes that works. Sometimes that is necessary, at least for a while. But eventually, I started realizing something. Going beyond small talk isn't just about emotional health. It's also about everything else that we say matters in our lives. Let's talk about some examples. Love requires going beyond small talk. A healthy marriage requires going beyond small talk. Friendships require it. Leadership requires it. Career growth needs it. Financial growth needs it. Parenting requires it. Think about it for a quick second. How many marriage therapists make a living simply helping two people talk to each other? Think about that for a minute. Not necessarily fixing problems, not necessarily solving problems, talking, helping people say what they've been carrying for years, helping people go beyond small talk. Because when we don't, like I've said before, things start leaking into marriages. Hmm. Ever heard your partner tell you, Sean, Mike, Joe, you never talk to me about anything. Why are you holding it all in? Heard that before? When we don't go beyond small talk, things pile up and leak and impact friendships, parenting, leadership. Things start impacting our physical health, our mental health, the way we show up at work, the way we show up at home. Here's another honest admission. It is so fair to not want to talk about deeper issues in life, especially when they are difficult to talk about or if they bring pain with them. It is so fair if you're not ready to do this for yourself yet. That's okay. Let's do it to protect our marriage. Let's do it to protect our family. Let's do it to protect our career. How about we go beyond small talk to protect the future we've been working so hard to build? Because if I don't understand what's piling up inside me, eventually it impacts all of those things. And maybe that's enough motivation to start. Maybe we don't begin by finding answers. Maybe we don't begin by paying attention. Maybe we just begin by paying attention to the symptoms, the resentment, frustration, the disconnection, loneliness, anxiety, the pressure, the impatience. And then together we start asking, what's underneath all of that? What am I carrying? What's causing it? And maybe over time, we get a little closer to the answer. I've noticed this in myself too. I can talk about work for an hour. Who's done that before? Who hasn't done that before? I can talk about sports forever. Many of us can do that. Many of us enjoy doing that. Projects, books, leadership, business. God knows I can talk about politics for a long time and yet still avoid saying what's actually going on inside me. Where's all this stress coming from? Who's putting all this pressure on me? Am I honest about all the fear in my life? Fear of losing a relationship, fear of not starting a new relationship after a divorce, fear of having a baby, fear of not having a baby, fear of financial decisions I've made, fear of decisions I have to make in the future. Why am I feeling disconnected with all sort of people around me? Why am I feeling so overwhelmed? Questions about purpose. The pressure of trying to hold life together while acting like everything is fine. I think a lot of men know exactly what that feels like. Let's ask a couple questions and ask you for an honest moment or two to reflect on them, please. Have you ever sat next to your wife at the end of a long day and felt disconnected? She's got something going on in her mind. I have something going on in my mind, but nobody's bringing it up. Nobody's talking about it. Let's just continue to scroll up and down on our phones and move on to the next day. Been there? Have you ever worried about losing your job but still walked into your house after a concerning conversation with your boss, acting all composed because you felt like you had no choice and that was the best for your family? Have you ever made promises to your wife or kids and for one reason or another couldn't keep those promises and had to live with the pressure of letting them down? What about feeling of getting caught between your partner and your family, trying to keep everybody happy while internally feeling exhausted? How come no one cares about my pain? Lost a loved one recently? Receive a dreadful news of a family member having cancer? But it is your job to stay strong for everybody else around you. Did you ever grow up as an immigrant family or had to move to a new country for work, didn't feel like you didn't fit in, or your kids don't feel like they fit in, but you're men, give me sports and beer and I'm happy anywhere, right? Nothing wrong with beer or sports. I love them both. I'm just tired of that being the center of every conversation or get together with my guy friends. That's the point I'm trying to make here. Are you a gay man? Had to come out to your dad? You have a gay son or daughter? He or she doesn't feel like they fit in? Yeah, no one wrote a life manual for any of that, huh? I've had many seasons where I felt anxious, lonely, disconnected, confused, emotionally numb, but still kept functioning because life doesn't stop and people still depend on you. I think a lot of men spend time in this space more than they admit. I had a recent personal realization came to me when I noticed I could spend an entire week solving problems at work, checking boxes, paying bills, planning projects, helping people moving forward, going to gym, watching sports, trading stocks, getting things done, being productive, making money, masculine, manly, and still not be able to answer a simple question. Why am I angry? Why am I unhappy? Why do I feel like I'm lost or something's missing? Not angry in the shouting at people sense. I'm in this sort of low grade frustration that just kind of sits there. I don't know if you've ever felt that. The feeling that just something isn't quite right. I'm not happy. I feel stuck. Something is missing, like I said. The feeling that life is moving, but maybe not moving the way I hoped. That feeling that I'm carrying something around and looking for the first opportunity to let it out. Have you ever snapped at your partner, your kid, your employee, and moments later felt completely ashamed? Maybe they did something wrong, but did they really deserve that reaction from me? Where did that reaction come from? And honestly, that's where I got stuck. Because if you'd asked me 6 months ago what I was angry about, I probably would have given you 10 different answers: work, stress, politics, family, the guy driving slow in front of me. Take your pick. But if I'm honest, I don't think any of those were really the thing that caused my frustration or anger. I think they were just convenient targets. Oh man, imagine your kid, the love of your life, being just a convenient target for my lack of proper outlet for my feelings and emotions and resentment piling up. Holy cow, that is tough to admit. I like solving problems. I like fixing things. I like moving forwards. I don't particularly enjoy sitting around talking about feelings. I'm a guy. I rather solve, not analyze. But what happens when you don't actually know what the problem is? What happens when life looks mostly okay from the outside, but something inside still feels unsettled? I've spent a lot of time thinking about that question. And honestly, I don't have a neat answer per se, but that's one of the reasons this podcast exists. When you're a teenager, you don't know better. When you're 25, you think you have forever. When you're 30, you're building. When you're 35, you're still building. And then one day you look up and you're in your 40s and you realize some of the same things that I have been avoiding have been riding along with me the entire time. The same fears, the same frustrations, the same questions, the same wounds. Except now I'm multiple decades older and I didn't think all of those things would blow up in my face one day. That is part of what motivates me to have these conversations now because I don't want to spend another 10 years outrunning things that need to be understood. I don't want to wake up a decade later and realize I spent another decade staying busy, productive, solving things, doing projects, making money, but never really dealing what was underneath. Let me be honest, my goal isn't to become obsessed with feelings. My goal isn't to sit around analyzing every emotion. My goal is much simpler. I want to live through life instead of escaping it. I want to experience challenges instead of simply surviving them. I want to deal with things while they're small instead of waiting for them to pile up and leak into my life somewhere else. Maybe as resentment, anxiety, as a burnout, as a broken relationship, a divorce, a physical health issue, maybe as something I never saw coming. Because here's the kicker, eventually everything gets talked about. The question is whether I choose to talk about it now or when life forces the conversation later. Here's a little disclaimer. Because conversations are intellectual, I think this is very important. Because some conversations are intellectual, it doesn't mean they're beyond small talk in my context. I can talk about work, money, politics, capitalism, imperialism, sports, and at a fairly intellectual level. But that is not what I'm talking about here. You know what I'm talking about. A lot of us know how to talk around life without actually talking about life. And I don't think most men do that because they're fake. A lot of us just never learn how or don't have the right people to go beyond small talk with. Or we have never learned how to talk honestly without feeling weak or without feeling needy or without feeling dramatic. Most men hate being dramatic, without feeling exposed. I hate feeling like I'm failing, and admitting to painful feelings sometimes for me feels like I am admitting failure. I hate that. Also, I'm a firm believer that this so-called naming something doesn't solve it either. Just because I'm naming it doesn't mean it actually solves it for me. I know, I'm not naive, but it usually starts something. And maybe that's all we're doing here. Maybe we're not fixing everything. Maybe we're not solving everything. Maybe we're just getting honest enough to name some things: pressure, loneliness, resentment, fear, disappointment, questions in life, because unnamed things have a way of running our lives. And when we let them do that, we can easily wake up one day and genuinely feel like we don't own the life we're in. Been there, done that. And maybe the first step toward freedom isn't having an answer. Maybe it's simply being honest enough to admit the question. Sometimes these episodes will just be me thinking out loud, like I'm doing for much of this episode. Sometimes there'll be conversations with other men. I'm super excited to have some of my great friends to be on the podcast and talk about their lives and an application of a lot of what we've talked about so far. Sometimes we'll bring therapists, counselors, coaches, authors, and friends into the discussion. We'll talk about books, we'll talk about research, faith, philosophy, life, success, failure, and ask a simple question: what of all of this actually holds up in real life? So, not just experts or partners or social media memes telling us how to feel, but real men talking about all the advice in the world and reflecting on what works and what doesn't. Why? Simple. Because I think a lot of us trying to figure out what it means to live well as men. So that's what this podcast is all about. Not a place for pretending we've got it all figured out, just a place to go a little beyond small talk. And if that sounds uncomfortable, well, giddy up. That's kind of the point. Jay Shetty, in his book Think Like a Monk, talks about how monks and trainee are asked what they see when they look at themselves in a very dusty mirror. Together, we want to go beyond small talk and clear up the foggy and dusty mirrors we choose to look ourselves in. That's why we are here, so we don't do it alone. I appreciate you for being here for me for this first conversations. And honestly, I am so looking forward to exploring a lot together. If this introductory episode resonated with you or tickled your curiosity, I would love for you to share it with one man in your life, a friend, a brother, a coworker, someone who's caring more than he talks about. Because that's exactly who this podcast is for. Thank you so much. Until next time, let's go beyond small talk. Thank you for listening to today's episode. I would love to hear your thoughts on today's conversation. Where in your life do you need to go beyond small talk right now? Maybe with your partner, maybe with a friend, a family member, or maybe just with yourself. Leave a comment, send a message, or share this episode with someone who came to mind while listening. And if these conversations are meaningful to you, consider subscribing and following the podcast. As always, thank you so much for being part of the conversation.